Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all again for this engaging panel discussion. So we have a very important panel discussion now, and the topic is use of data analytics and cloud computing in construction projects. So for this panel discussion, we have Mr. Sanjay Atanki. He is the head of TTS and cost consultancy from Turner Project Management. We have Mr. Gaurav Modgil, is the partner from Global Sea, a leading project management company from India. Then we have Mr. Ashish Jain, as the country manager India from Turner and Townsend. Then we have Mr. Karthik Venkat Subramaniam, is the global vice president data strategy and development from Oracle Construction and Engineering. And Ms. Geeta Ramamurthy, she is basically from a company called Atkins, is from SNC Lavalin. She is the head of digital operations India. So I would like to share my screen and would like to introduce you with our panel moderator for today, Mr. Sanjay Atanki. Yeah, so Mr. Sanjay Atanki is the head of TTS and cost consultancy from Turner Project Management. Mr. Atanki is a senior level real estate professional with 20 years of experience in the Indian and the Middle Eastern markets. Sanjay comes with more than a decade of entrepreneurial experience offering cross-functional leadership to the firm. He has experience across sectors such as high-rise, mixed-use, townships, retail, healthcare, hospitality, IT, ITES, pharmaceutical, logistics, modular construction, etc., in the fields of development, project, and cost management. So I would like to pass it on to Mr. Atanki. He will take it forward from here, and he will be introducing other panelists, and he will start with the panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Atanki.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be moderating this panel. Even more exciting is the panelists that you see around me. Without much ado, during this course of discussion, we would probably be hearing some jargons such as big data, AI, ML, blockchain, and whatnot. But there is an underlying trait in all of these jargons, which is data. And all of us, keep hearing this cliche that data is the new crude. But I want to stick out my neck and say probably data is the new oxygen going forward, even now it's medicine. Are all of these jargons fictitious or many of them are valid? This is what we're going to probably touch upon during the course of this discussion. How far are we into the game and what's the end game to it? So talking with me today, I have this exciting panel. The first person I want to introduce in no particular order. I rarely say good things about this person because we compete like anything in the common client. So welcome Ashish, country manager of Turner and Townsend. He comes in with 20 years of experience. The truth has to be told, Ashish, today I cannot hide it. And he is an individual who's, apart from managing his business, is currently spearheading the tech advancement initiatives within his firm. Quite excited to have you with us here, Ashish.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Next person is the finance professional turned into a technology leader. So number crunching and tech usage is a forte. She is CA and ICMA and holds certifications from prestigious top-ranking business schools on digital transformation from MIT, and also corporate strategy from UCL School of Management. And that's Geeta for you from Atkins. Geeta has also diverse experience of leading finance operations, business verticals, business change, digital transformation in India and overseas. She's currently leading the digital bit in India and spearheading the corporate strategy from harnessing data and taking the company to the next phase of evolution as well. Next person I'd like to bring to the forum he's a global vice president, data strategy and product development at Oracle Construction and Engineering. Welcome, Karthik.
Thanks, Sanjay.
In a career spanning of 21 years across 4 continents, he successfully built many high-performing teams and delivered large-scale digitization initiatives that have been featured in case studies. He was recently named as one of the Australia's top 10 analytical leaders for 2021. Great stuff there. He's a passionate believer in disruptive power of technology and data. He led the launch of Oracle's construction intelligence cloud services and an AI-powered industry solution. And he's also part of the industry advisory board at Deakin Business School. Safe to say that most of us today watching this session use all of our products or most of it, in a sense. My final introduction is panelist Mr. Gaurav Mudgil. He's a managing partner at Global C. He's a structural engineer by qualification from the coveted University of California at Berkeley and also a gold medalist from PEC Chandigarh. His firm is at the forefront of providing strategic consulting, project management, software solutions, and engineering across real estate sectors, including infra. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Without much ado, Karthik, I'd like to address the first bit to you. What do you feel about all this big data? And I know that you talk a lot about disruption, and disruption is a good thing, right? And let's not have a negative connotation, which is commonly that we have because of the term in itself. How do you think this new aspect of it is traversing its way across the global scenario? And if you could perhaps give us some insight into how it is happening in India and how far along behind, or are we going through in the right direction? Karthik?
Sure. Thanks, Sanjay. I think it's a really good question around where are we in this journey, right? The most important thing you need to be in this journey is a vital ingredient called data, right? I often refer to this as, if you're cooking dal, well, you need to have lentils in the pantry. So if you're doing AI, machine learning, data analytics, you need to have data. So for everyone listening in, look into your pantry and see what sort of data you have in your pantry. That will tell you how advanced or not advanced you are, right? But when I look at it from a global perspective, one thing that's very clear is the Western nations say, I'm based here in Australia, very heavily digitized construction and engineering sector. US is pretty digitized. Europe is even more digitized. And some countries in Asia, especially Singapore. When we look at India, it makes sense, right? The industry is labor intensive. So depending on whichever reports you look at, they say about 1 to 3% is invested in technology. So if 1 to 3% of your annual turnover is invested in technology, that means there is a long way to go. But what I also want to say is today we're talking about data, but before data comes digitization. So your manual paper-based processes, you're taking those and converting it into systems. That's digitization. So that's the first step that everyone needs to go through. The second bit is digitalization, because you want to digitize all of your processes end to end. So if you're going on field and you have little iPads for use, then you can't go back into the office and go back to paper. So all of your processes need to be digitalized. And then we talk about digital transformation. So most importantly, we're talking about datafication here. Every one of these is producing data, and therefore AI and machine learning. So I guess a long way of saying that I think especially India has a long way to go, but I feel that is the opportunity. And that's why we are all here. It's a very, very exciting opportunity that the investment has been less. Therefore, the investment can be more. It is behind. Therefore, there's enough scope to catch up. That means over the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be investment, venture capital coming in, startup ecosystems developing, and perhaps a complete remap of how construction works today, exactly what is happening with retail in India. So yeah, very, very exciting space, but a long, long way to go.
From what I hear from you, Karthik, is we are the cusp of something big, isn't it?
Correct.
Perhaps should have started it a little earlier, but better late than never. Ashish, if I could get you in here, what do you think with particular to the Indian construction industry in terms of usage of data? Is at least, is there a method in the madness currently?
Thanks, Sanjay. I think I'll pick up from where Karthik left off. I think we talked about investments to the scale of 1 to 3%. I think that itself is big, considering the construction industry as such globally. We are under 1% at the moment. And with whatever advancements are there in Europe and UK and Americas and all other places we talked about, there's still a long way to go, even in those places. And India, I would say we are just being born, you know. There is nothing that we have done in the past. I mean, probably the most important digitization project that the Indian government would have taken is the Aadhaar cards that we talked about, right? So I think that is what has to happen in the construction industry. As we talked about, the first step is, as Karthik rightly said, the digitization of the information. And I think that is the step we are at many companies level. What is also conflicting at this time is that most of the companies wants to get into this digital space and data and analytics and all of those things, but there is no clear roadmap to it. I think that is where we are struggling in trying to have a method to the madness, so to say. There is madness. There are bits and pieces where people are trying to do things. There are, you know, if I take the entire chain of the construction process, there are something happening in the operation space. There's something happening in the design space. There's something happening in the cost stage and construction, but they're not integrated. So I think that is where we are in the Indian industry, so to say, if I have to just very briefly talk about it.
If I could just press you a little bit on that. How prepared are we currently? Because if we need to go to the next level, are we working towards it at this point of time?
I think it depends. It depends on how companies are taking it. There is definitely an impetus now on this because the COVID has led to it. And people have realized, I mean, we all are working remotely. Construction and remote have never gone hand in hand, right? Right now, we are all working remotely. And how is that happening? That is happening through the digitization or digital usage or the data and everything. So there are places where we can implement it. There are companies who are looking at it. But again, the challenge that we foresee is, do we have processes? Like, for example, we have IS standards for all of those things. Do we have standards that we want to get to in the Indian industry for that? I don't think we have it at the moment. And we are far away from where we are, even if you start comparing ourselves with Singapore, for that matter, where things have become mandatory in terms of BIM and other things, but we have not implemented. Some of the governments, like Andhra government, have started doing it, but not many of those governments have started picking up those things. So unless and until there is a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach to do this, it's going to become a difficult task. I can tell about my company, we have taken that mental. We are digitizing a lot of things. We are making things, data work for us. That is something that we have taken up, but again, it's very siloed. So if the companies are not coming together, they're not sharing information, it's going to become a little bit of a task. But at the same time, there is process which each and every international companies, at least even for that matter, some smaller companies are doing it in India.
Thank you, Ashish. Gaurav, if I could just come to you, probably what Ashish touched upon is there are two things that needs to happen in the country, isn't it? Is there a need for a government-based support, number one? And number two, if it's there or if it's not there, we as companies, how do we do it and become self-sufficient, right? What's your view on such matters, considering there is confidentiality issues, there are structural challenges that we could possibly face it, and how that has helped your firm in the pre-construction stage of things?
So, yeah, thank you, Sanjay. Sanjay, I would like, before addressing this, I would like to, continue what Karthik and Ashish said. I have some stats, we all will be surprised to know that I'm pretty sure all of us know, but including the audience, that India ranks 5th, as per the UN data for the construction value add, including all the industries globally. We are much ahead of Spain, France, UK. And we almost were like $700 billion plus at the current US dollar value. But when it comes to, like the actual manpower or the manpower efficiency, you will be surprised that we are only at 60 cents per hour compared to, $7, which is like a base for Europe or for Australia. So, there's a big gap that on one hand, we are ahead, we are just behind China and the US in terms of global construction value add. But when it actually comes on to the productivity, we are even below Pakistan, just to give, it's a wrong example, or even Bangladesh. So, on the subject and at a micro level, I would like to take the discussion more towards what you said, that what is the structural issue? So, in my opinion, none of the developers or the promoters are, bothered about having, the applications or investing in technology, because for them, what matters is that the hotel has to be up and running, the healthcare facility has to be on time. They have bigger tasks and bigger, challenges to look after than actually looking up at technology or the processes. So I totally agree to what Karthik was saying earlier, that, first step would be digitization, and second step would be the, where the structural changes happens at the firm level or the company level, like yours, like ours. You are large, big firms, and we are like more boutique firms specialized in, 2, 3, 4 verticals. So I would also like to, give you a small example that there are a lot of applications starting from Econex, which is pretty, capex intensive, to even applications like Fieldwire, Procore, which, a lot of projects we have used where the client did not have the budget, but we knew that we wanted it. A very basic data like a daily progress report or a site pictures, are being collected by multiple people. The audit guy collects it, the site guy collects it, your the contractor or a specialized agency collects it. So if a simple raw data like a DPR or a site progress, which, for some clients, we even used Google Docs because they did not have the budget or they did not wanted to invest into that. And we found that with the proper set checklist and a very routine automation on Google Docs, the same information was collected at one point of time by one person, but it was used by not only by the billing finance teams, but also as historical records when we do for a claim management, or we go for a lot of time projects goes into, claims, arbitrations, and other contractual issues. It helped us a lot and clients a lot in terms of, overcoming those matters, and also in terms of risk assessment or, limiting the cost and the time overruns. So I totally correlate that digitization of Indian construction industry, particularly looking at, 60 cents an hour as a man-hour rate, which, our industry is being paid, to, coming up to not $7, but at least, somewhere between, there's a big step. And that is where I feel that all of us should work towards. So that is my input on the matter as of now.
So Gaurav, and I can feel for you, and all of us are consultants here, right? I mean, what you're basically saying is, yeah, our output is going to be eventually a function of what actually the client would want. So the client is perhaps not understanding. So what do you think could be this challenge to the change in mindset that is probably required?
Yes. This is, I actually wanted to hit upon this part. So I feel that there is a lot of disconnect between the SaaS and the software, development companies, and what actually is required. So there are large developers, large promoters, public level projects, which have their own complexities. Now, there is a big market which companies like Karthik's, and also I would say Step Down, can actually collaborate with companies like yours and ours, where we can, try to bridge that gap. For example, a hospital or a hotel may not require the same set of application or just, tweaking the application for a customer. I know custom application will always be expensive, but I feel that there can be a bridging where something which is more critical for a particular, say, for example, a hotel, or even a hotel has 30 brands. So, we can actually try to work together. There's a big disconnect of engineering, architectural, and, EPC firms or PMC firms and the software provider. There is, like Ashish rightly said, that, we all, maybe the data confidentiality is still there, but at least on a technology platform, the technology providers and the engineering providers have to come together and shake hands. Otherwise, we will never be able to. It will be a good, discussion on the forum. It will be a good discussion for all of us to be, having, it's like showing what SpaceX or Hyperloop is doing, but not actually achieving it. So, my take would be, if there can be a good collaboration at grassroots level, and maybe, customizing application for projects which don't need it, but basic customization will lead a drastic change in the skill set of people which are using it.
Absolutely. Collaboration and a concerted effort is perhaps the need of the hour. And moment people start feeling the benefits in terms of actual value, then we will all go towards it. Karthik, that's an action point for you. Perhaps we could huddle up later on and look into how we could do this.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely worth the conversation.
Hey, Geeta, sorry for keeping you waiting for the chat. One of the things I wanted to check with you is, one is before we hit the construction, that's one aspect of it. But before we hit construction, and I know for a fact that your firm is very actively checking this a bit, predictive analysis and the usage of AI during your design phase. How far are we? Are we there?
Sure. Thanks, Sanjay. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah.
So first of all, thanks, Sanjay, for this pertinent question. And I'll also like to take the opportunity to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. So coming to your question about, use of predictive analytics. For us, particularly, we've seen this as a classic opportunity, particularly in the area of asset management. So about 3 to 4 years back, one of our clients was having a huge challenge in terms of being able to, detect distresses on the pavements. So they have the responsibility of operating and maintaining miles and miles of roadways and pavements. So what they encountered was that there was a huge cost involved, in tracking and detecting distresses, as well as there was also an issue of accuracy. And it was being done through a combination of manual methods and some archaic, sort of systems, which wasn't serving the purpose. So the ask for us was, as a business, can we do something? Can we come up with a solution using new technologies that will help them achieve this, at a rate of, let's say, processing of 2 images per second? So then, what we realized was that this was going to be a big data problem because there's so much of data that we'll have to deal with. And secondly, how are we going to really get that speed with that level of accuracy? So, what I did was, it's not just me, but the entire team, we're working as a global team. What we did was to look at what will make sense for us, leveraging the data as well as applying the right technologies. So this is where we piloted an experiment with, machine learning. So huge amount of data, georeference data came in through sharp images, and, we converted that into pixels. And then once we were able to do that, we were also able to, build the right architecture so that, we could build the data models. It was in an iterative manner and, continuously working also in close proximity with the client to understand whether the level of precision and accuracy was at the right, ballpark. And we were able to finally come up with a solution that was able to detect these distresses with 75% accuracy. And we took it beyond, just detection to look at prediction as well. And we were able to get 90% accuracy. Now, what was the outcome for the end client? So 30% efficiency, straight away 30% addition to the bottom line, because, on an investment of $2 million, they were able to save 600K. And this opened up huge opportunities for them to further harness this data for further analytics. So for me, it was a real classic example where we were able to leverage the data as well as, apply the right technologies, and in this case, machine learning, to give us differentiated outcomes and give better outcomes for the client. So I do see there's a lot of opportunity, and this was for a client in North America. However, I think, there are opportunities for us to leverage this in the Indian context as well. So does that answer your question, Sanjay?
Absolutely, Geeta. The moment we touch the aspect of cost, everybody becomes touchy, right? And this is where we have to show that value to the clients. And in fact, I just see a question from Asitesh, a national business manager from Trimble. Do you feel technology adoption should be driven from client side or from engineering consultant side as an advisor to owners and / clients? So I think the answer just was stated by Geeta herself. Now, you go show that value, any client is going to keep coming back to you. But let's, as a takeaway for all of us, we should all get together and see, probably if it's even a simple value card proposition that we as a software provider, be it as a client or be it as a consultant, we come up something for the industry. And that would be a good way of looking at it. Just still talking on cost side of things, Ashish, what is your view on this? I mean, there's so much data, right? I mean, we day in and out onboard vendors and contractors on behalf of our clients. Historically, probably in a year, we do hundreds of projects. What's the opportunity that you see and in terms of using that past historical cost data and how we can predict and give a better value to our clients?
Thanks, Sanjay. I think that's a very good question. And I think the opportunity is huge, is what I would say to start with. In Turner & Townsend, we have already started working on this. I mean, we have, to start with, very basic thing is to standardize the kind of information or the data points that we collect information on. So any project, every project, and any asset class that we're working on, we are collecting data at our ends right now at all points. So whether it is historic data, which is being digitized now, obviously there is digital format of it, but putting it in a machine that we have created for ourselves, where it start working on insights, predictability for clients to a peer group. For example, Gaurav talked about a hotel vendor wants to do different kind of categories they have. What are the other peer groups doing in those categories, and where is it that they are spending? And that gives an insight to make them those informed decisions. There is predictability in around what the project is going to cost. There is one part of it, which is design part of it, elements. So we are trying to correlate the kind of data associated with the cost and associated attributes to it. What kind of a building was it? Was it a very different kind of a high-rise building? Was the facade is a different character? So, and there is a lot of whole life cycle costing that is also attached to it, where we also bring in the value engineering aspect of things when we start building the projects. So at the start point, the client is pretty much aware of what are they looking at. And if it's a unique building that they're going to build in, what are the parameters which will cater to a higher cost? What are the parametric analysis around all of those things? All that is being collated at our end. And that is what we are trying to now provide to our clients in terms of benchmarking, in terms of value engineering, in terms of whole life cycle costing, in terms of predictability of cost to complete. And it's not just to talk about, well, this is your design and this is how it is. It is even at a feasibility stage. If a building has some elements which we have put together, what is it should cost to you? So that is something that we are working on internally. And also, kind of trying to make use of the data that we have. We've done thousands of projects across the globe, which we are bringing it all together in one place, and then utilize that to start predicting asset-wise and project-wise analysis around it.
Thank you, Ashish. Karthik, I mean, that brings back to the original point of discussion, right? There's an ocean of data available for us. And we're probably in a small boat trying to find our way, the shore without a lighthouse, perhaps at the moment. There is perhaps a lighthouse, we don't know where it is. So Karthik, how do you look at this vis-a-vis the risks, risk management aspect of it? And could you give us an example or two of, how far ahead risk we can be possibly predicting currently?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I answer that, I think the other thing that is happening at the moment and globally is this generic use of the word AI, machine learning, prediction, right? When you right click on an Excel spreadsheet and say show a trend line, there is a bit of forecast happening there. Is that machine learning, right? That could be a simple linear regression. So the way I explain it to people is there's three aspects of this. It's formulaic. If you can put it into a formula and you're calculating a forecast to complete, right? That's actually not machine learning. That is a formula-based approach. The second thing is simulation, where you put in different values and you run several risk simulations like Monte Carlo simulations. And that again is different to machine learning. And classic machine learning is looking at all the historical data, running algorithms, and then trying to make predictions with minimum human inputs so that you're not creating bias. And so these three different techniques are really important, because otherwise all of us are doing machine learning, right? So formulaic, simulation, and algorithmic. So now to answer your question, a lot of the things that we are trying to do, we do 1 and 2. We've always done that in our products that you guys mentioned. We've got Primavera P6, we've got Primavera Cloud, Aconex. So 1 and 2 we've always done. Now what we're doing is we're doing 3. We're taking the algorithmic approach. So 2 sessions ago, there was Ashley Nugawala from Oracle that was explaining many of the use cases. So we're trying to use schedule data and predict the probability of delay. But we're also saying, here are the activities that might be delayed, and here's why you might want to take a look at it. So that's one example. We're looking at the probability of a litigation or a dispute using Aconex correspondence data. So we're looking at unstructured text and trying to surface up issues that might happen. Now, behind the scene, because we're talking about data, it uses NLP and all sorts of great AI machine learning techniques. But that's not the important point. The point is we're raising risks, health and safety risk, risk of rework, potential supply chain disruptions in terms of how information is exchanged. So there's a whole bunch of risks that we surface right now in our product called Construction Intelligence Cloud. But one that is really, really pertinent to the previous one that Ashish was talking about is we're trying to predict change requests. Because what's happening a lot of the times is you're blindsided by changes that are coming in, and changes leads to variations that impact the budget. And then you don't really know where that came from. Next thing you know, you're over budget. So we're going back to the source and saying, if somebody is talking about, oh, that was different to the specs we talked about, we might need to raise a variation or a change request. Can we surface that up really immediately? Because by the time it actually hits the project team, otherwise it's really, really late. So we're looking at really, really practical applications. So to answer your question, there's a lot of risk, but a lot of the risks surface up really, really early, just that they're not noticed. It's like that chip that becomes a crack and then finally breaks. So what we're saying is, can we pick it up as early as possible? So in the world of analytics, there's lead indicators and lag indicators. A lot of the focus has been on the lag indicators. After something has happened, what we're trying to do is, can we figure out something before it happens, right? So huge amounts of use cases, schedule delays, litigation, disputes, health and safety, rework, supply chain, variations, RFIs, and we will continue to build on it. So lots of risks. We want to pick it up early on in the piece.
Thanks, Karthik. You picked out a line from my next question to Gaurav, literally, because we all agree that variations have occurred long time back. Just that it's been identified mostly during construction, perhaps, and there's a lot of rework that happens out of it. And Gaurav, if there is a way that we can do, is there a relationship between the procurement side of risks vis-a-vis how we can probably prevent it before we head into construction? Your thoughts, please.
I would like to, I am pretty much, I agree to what Karthik was talking about, but I just want to add something to what he said, is that there is always, like when we say we plan a project, there is an element, I would say, I cannot quantify that, 20% effort or 30% effort, but there's a lot of aspects which actually are related to, the ground or the action which is being done by an unskilled labor, who is, his supervisor is the only control over him. Now, what I can correlate is, like Ashish also added about, them as a company doing the procurement phase. I tell my clients, and I totally correlate with Ashish, I feel a lot of project delays do not happen solely because of, delayed planning or delayed approvals or financial cash flows. It's always the wrong timing of selecting a vendor. You'll be surprised that we all face in a project that we are doing one project and we are just doing a phase 2 of the same project. And everybody in the procurement team is still running, trying to find a vendor, trying to find the right, the budget, the right cost. And even after continuing the same old vendor who did a perfect job on, say, phase 1 of the same project in the same location, in phase 2, he messes up. He brings rework, he brings RFIs, he brings everything to you. So, I feel that the only method, which I am maybe repeating myself, is that project specific and customization of the applications at the initial level is something which is the key. we are still not, I would say, as a firm, we are still not very advanced in terms of like AI or machine learning. But whatever tools are available, we have seen that working with the same client on a second project, there is a historical data and there is a historical information. And there are pain points for every customer. For somebody, the financial is not is not a botheration. For them, maybe the timeline is more critical. They are willing to spend delta on having a faster construction technology. They are even okay with getting the best system of shuttering, doing a post-tension slab, investing more. So I feel, again, a case-to-case basis of risk analysis. And again, I would say a marriage or amalgamation of the software company and the engineering EPC company or a BMC is something which is required. On the longer term, for larger groups and somebody who's building a 4th, 5th hotel or a 9th hospital chain, there, what Ashish has been pointing out is I feel is the key to the future. Because we are facing that for a particular healthcare group, we are now doing the 9th facility, and still we cannot predict to them, what is the actual cost of the hospital going to be. And it's the same set of hospital, only difference is that they are building in a different city. And sometimes the regulatory issues come into picture. Sometimes, it is the construction, sometimes it's the timeline. But it's very funny that, working with the same customer for last almost like a decade, and now doing a 9th facility for them, neither them, neither us, we still cannot predict, what is the project cost. So that is my take on it. And I, again, feel that we are still working in isolation. And in terms of, bits and pieces of different applications which are available in the market, I still feel there is a strong requirement for somebody to, bridge that gap.
Gaurav, absolutely right. I mean, the advent of RERA a few years ago, what it did to the residential segment, right? It automatically increased the pre-construction phase for the construction industry. So, which means automatically we started spending more time on design, we started spending more time on procurement aspects of it, so that we spend less time of troubleshooting down the line. So probably residential sector is kind of sorted by us having that time. And it's also a function of how we tell the clients and make, in general, the industry understand, look, we are going to build that building probably, it'll take about 5 years, right? And it's a different matter that the Empire State Building was done in less than 2 years. And that was quite a very long time back without any of these jargons that we've been using. But the building has to probably be living for the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years plus. So there is a lot of thought that actually needs to be put in to make sure that, we set clear-cut targets and how we are managing, but not in isolation, but through the life period of the thing. Geeta, that brings to my, Gaurav, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. It is, maybe it will be very ironical to say that, but I think the way the country has been functioning and how RERA was implemented, I feel that like how Singapore or UK made BIM mandatory. So, we have to take those baby steps. A directive from the government to organize. See, when we talk of a residential sector, since the customers were I don't want to be sounding political, it was more, like individual, and the masses were much more bigger. The automatic control came from the top down that, we need to control, we need to safeguard the end user or the buyer of the house. Now, here the developer is building for somebody else. But when we talk of a hotelier or a large commercial developer, they are actually, spending the money for themselves. So I feel that there has to be some kind of, a self-enlightenment or something like RERA, which will be the only process, because that is the only way I feel the industry, automatically gears up. So I think that's my take on it.
We do need that stick sometimes to get right, isn't it? Geeta, what's your take and your experience when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to setting clear-cut carbon goals right up front, and how do we monitor it through the life cycle of a project?
Thank you, Sanjay. That's a brilliant question. And as an organization in SNC Lavalin, we are also, like many others in the industry, focused a lot on the ESG goals, and sustainability is top-ranking priority for us in every sense. So a lot of leadership carry this as a KPI in terms of how do we drive this in the work we do. So I would like to share one of the examples of a work that we are doing. This is on the back of a win in the UK, again, a different region, but it's the right tone and the right example. So SNC Lavalin was awarded a property project where the UK government engaged us as a partner, a program delivery partner, and a sustainability a solutions partner. We look at the 4 million square feet of public sector space and drive new thinking in terms of suggesting sustainability based solutions. So what we were asked to do was essentially look at what is the current status of these buildings, what is the emitted carbon already, and what is the operational carbon, harness the data, look at ways of getting the data, and then trying to basically run some calculations to see what is the carbon emissions really, and what is it comparing to the prescribed standard by UK government based on their building regulations that has been published. How does it compare? What is the variance? And once we understand that, once we do that analysis, the idea is then be able to go back and provide consultancy around the interventions, the decarbonization interventions or priorities that, that public sector office has to focus on. I know, this is one of the biggest sort of engagements for us, and it's in a way a big shift, as a business and as a, country as well for UK. But what we are doing as part of that, Sanjay, is that we are first of all trying to gather data from the multiple sources, just like, I think Ashish Gaurav mentioned. I think the data is lying in disparate sources and it's not, centrally located. There is no correlation. So we are trying to bring all the data together, first of all. And secondly, based on that, we obviously have to do the next thing, which is to understand what is embedded carbon, carry out the calculations and compare it with the prescribed parameters. Because without that, we will just be, saying that in 20 years' time, we will become net zero. It's not going to happen. You've got to take some concrete steps. So we will be working with external partners, vendors, third-party vendors, and as well as, there will be partner organizations outside as well that will form part of this collaborative effort. And the idea is then to be able to suggest or provide the advisory around the interventions, whether it's in terms of, doing some mitigation measures, or whether it's in terms of, proactively, what do you do to reduce the further carbon emissions, in the future life of the asset, because these buildings will last another 50, 60 years, if you like, because some of them were, built maybe 15, 20 years back. So that's a priority. Sustainability is a big priority, and absolutely you're right, whether it's in the area of design or whether it's in the area of the interface between design and construction, sustainability thinking is very much coming into play for us.
Perhaps if we actually all look at sustainability as the actual end game in this entire life cycle process, then we would set right all the prequels to it, hoping for that. And yeah, net zero buildings, quite possible. It's still a distant dream, Geeta. We've just started one in our UK region, and it's been a great experience so far, and it's just about to take off the ground there. Good stuff, Geeta. I have a question I can see for Karthik. This is a question from SV Surender, Head of Training and Development at the CAD Coach. His question to you is, are we losing mathematical ability by depending on machine learning? For example, we have devised earned value management to predict costing and time. Now we do not have any.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We are not losing mathematical capability. Machine learning is the implementation of mathematical capability, but at scale right now. So today, one of the buzzwords you will hear everybody talk about is deep learning and neural networks. But if you look for the history of neural networks, I think the first paper was written in 1943. And the first implementation of a perceptron, which is a basic unit of neural network, was in 1958, 59, right? The only problem was, over the course of these years, it was not actually feasible to apply these to large-scale real-world problems. So as Moore's law has kicked in, compute has become cheaper, we can do more processing, we are actually able to implement some of these ideas. And the newer algorithms that are coming up all the time are nothing but application of mathematics that are packaged with a fancy name that we are now applying to real-world problems. So I think the best way to look at this is mathematics is still the core. It is still the core function that AI and machine learning relies on, just that it is able to do it much faster than any human can. So it's absolutely still there.
Great, Karthik. Ashish, I had this question already, written out for you, but what Karthik and Surendra just discussed on that question and answer, right? Are we using the human element? Should we worry? All of us going to lose jobs?
Well, I won't say we'll all lose a job. I mean, we've all seen Transformers and stuff like that. So I don't think the machines are taking over the humanity as yet, but probably 50 years down the lane, we will all not exist by then. I don't know how many of you would. I'm not sure I will, but I think there is a change coming. There is a change coming. We all have to adapt to that change. I mean, we have to become more present in what we. So I think what is needed now is we all are civil engineers. We all are mechanical engineers and architects and stuff. So, and somebody talked about mathematics. And I agree. I mean, we may be losing out on. Well, why do I have to learn all these calculus right now in engineering? Because I'll have some software available. I'll do it through that. So, yeah, that element. I mean, maybe we have to look at that, how the education system has to change to adapt to all of those things. But for us as professionals, I think where we stand today, we have to become more relevant to the current times. And the only way to do that is to reskill and upskill our own selves, become more analytics. Now, engineering and these professional roles are going to become more and more analytics than actually because rest of the things will be done by the softwares and the machines and every other thing. So if we are not upskilling ourselves, we may become obsolete then.
Right. Anybody else would want to add? Yeah, Gaurav?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what the question which you asked and what Ashish also answered pretty well. In my last, I have been working for only about 15 years. So I have not seen a project where over the years, the number of workers have reduced. I'm only seeing the challenges, the level of, earlier on, we used to be very happy doing a 10-story building when we started. And now we are doing 20, 30-story building. So I actually would like to, I totally correlate with Ashish that I don't see the human factor going away, but the challenges and the skill sets and what we are seeing in the West happening more and more prominent in the specifically talking of India as a country. So I've actually not seen numbers of manpower reduced. I've seen the number of workers, everything being increased. And we ask this question to our clients, and sometimes our clients also ask us that, Gaurav, okay, in this project you're using so many of more and more of technology, but why is the labor count is always an issue with the contractor? Why are you always fighting out that you don't have the workers in spite of having all these machines, cranes? So I think that is my take on it.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think what data, technology, digital, whatever you want to call it, it is only going to make things safer and probably more efficient. But the humans, I mean, we are not going to disappear from this face of the earth. We will continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because this is a very common question that we get as well, right? So two things. Baseball game, Moneyball, a lot of you probably have seen that, and that changed the way AI and machine learning is applied to baseball, and it's called sabermetrics. And today you will find that the baseball teams look for sabermetric analysts as a position description, right? So as these technologies change, you need more people to manage these technologies. So the nature and the skills change, but the fundamental thing doesn't change. That I completely agree with what Gaurav and Ashish are saying. You need more people. But I think what is also happening here, which is very interesting, is that as we grow bigger and bigger and bigger, we have fancier technologies. The projects are getting complex as well. So the simplest way to put it is, it's not substitution, it's augmentation. It allows us to make better decisions. So I think there is no replacement or substitution here.
Yeah. Geeta?
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. So from my perspective, I think few things will not go away. The human mind, the ability to do, sort of critical thinking, come up with creative ideas and be able to draw judgments. I think that definitely in the foreseeable future is not going to be completely, taken over by machines, I think. So you're right. I mean, it's going to be supplementing the efforts that humans are putting in. And we need to learn to work better with machines as humans. Thanks.
I guess we're all alluding to the common line that, yes, probably artificial intelligence is any day better than natural stupidity. But at the same time, we need to be changing our mindsets from, we always keep looking for what's the next big thing, right? I mean, this is no more the next big thing. This is the now big thing. We need to start working towards it. I mean, some of you watching this, most of us are, but some of you are probably not in the business of big data, right? But it's unwritten thing that it's a writing on the wall that soon big data will be in your business. So we all need to be prepared. We all need to be looking towards it, and probably with collaboration and a concerted effort, we'll be doing things faster and make ourselves live in a better place, perhaps. Anybody else want to talk? Have a final word? The mindful, we just crossed 5 minutes past the session time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks all panelists. Thanks, Sanjay, for moderating.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sanjay.
It's been my pleasure. And over to you, Sanjeev. Sanjeev,
you're on mute, Sanjeev.
We've all heard this many times. You're on mute.
I'm really sorry about this. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining today. And it's very engaging panel discussion. And there are a lot of attendees. I can still see there are people who are listening to the session. It's very engaging and very informative, rather, from the technical experts like you basically put forward their views on this particular topic. So there are a few questions I think I have pasted in the chat box. And still, for the attendees, if you have any questions for the panel moderator or panelists, you can directly chat with them on the platform today and tomorrow. So it was really good to have you all join this particular session, and some of the biggest companies related to project management and construction. So Mr. Ataki, you would like to add anything?
No, I'm good. I think we've picked our brains a little bit. We've mined our gray cells a little bit. We'll have to start putting all that into action sooner or later. Sure.
So from the solution provider side, we have Oracle Construction and Engineering. So we have Karthik here. So this topic was basically associated with a technology company and how technologies can basically change the entire digital transformation, help the organization to transform their work processes. So I would like to request the attendees, if you would like to learn more about Oracle solutions, you can visit the booth in the sponsor section. And if you have some technical questions, you can directly chat with Mr. Sanjay Atanki or Ms. Geeta Ramamurthy, Mr. Ashish Jain, and even Gaurav. And Karthik is there. He's a technical person himself, so he can assist you with any queries related to data management and cloud computing in construction projects. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining the session today. And this basically brings us to the end of this session. So I would look forward to see you all tomorrow again. So all our attendees, speakers, would like to have you on board tomorrow as well. So this is today's last session. With this, it's like a closing statement for today, and I'll look forward to see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.